Welcome on into the Fantasy Football Forge Week 5 wide receiver rankings video. And as you can see, I also have projections for you. So I have a low end and a higher end expected projection. Typically, you can expect that these players should land within that range about a third or 2/3 of the time, a third of the time going below or above. You can find these rankings. You can find, by the way, when you find these up on the website, www.theFFForge.com, there is this little tab down at the bottom. If you just want to see a more simplified rankings version of this, then you can just click on that little tab on the rankings tab there, and it'll show you that for all the positions. These videos, these will be posted up on the website by Wednesday, hopefully afternoon, but Wednesday evening at the latest. That's really obnoxious. And so we'll get into them. We'll go through them in tiers in just a moment. Just a quick reminder, I am going live every day. No, on Thursday and Saturday evenings at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for any start-sit questions. Just talk some football, hang out, those types of things, especially on the Saturday, Thursday, and then Sunday morning, 2 hours prior to kickoff when I go live. Those are definitely more focused on start-sit questions, but I get trade questions, all sorts of stuff. In this video, we will also cover my loves and my fades of the week, and those are just basically my starts and my sits. Last week, how did I do with my starts, my loves? I gave you Justin Reed, who ended up as the wide receiver 2 on the week, and DJ Moore, who ended up as wide receiver 36. A little bit disappointing of a finish there, but sometimes the whole idea of a fade is, or of a love, is that even if they don't meet our expectations, they're in such a good matchup that hopefully they won't completely disappoint, like my other love, Amari Cooper, who only had 5.5 fantasy points. That's definitely disappointing. DJ Moore, obviously, you were okay if you started him. Hopefully, he didn't lose you the week like Amari Cooper might have. That's what I'm getting at. For my fades or my sits last week, went out of my way on Amon-Ra St. Brown. Just to point out that he might have a little bit of a disappointing week, and it came very close to that. He had 6 receptions, caught all 6 of his targets, so only 6 targets too, for 45 yards. So, 7.5 yard baseline there, but he did catch a touchdown, which goes a long ways, of course, towards your final score. And he also threw for a touchdown, which is obviously something I didn't pick up, have on the slate. So he ends up having a good week, but I consider that a victory. There is, in terms of why I faded him, I expected it to be a limited week. I did not suggest that you sit him, but I just told you to, maybe start somebody with a little more upside in your flex spot this week compared to the safer option. Then I faded Calvin Ridley. He only had 2 fantasy points on the week, so that was good. And Xavier Worthy, I faded. And we'll say I screwed up there, I guess. Wide receiver 19 on the week. I consider that kind of a DQ. It doesn't count. Rashee Rice's injury, I'm sure, helped to make increased the odds of him having a better week. All right, that's going to bring us on to this week's rankings. And so when we do this, red is good. The deeper the red, the better. Blue is bad. It's just like taking a shower. Hot, good, blue, cold. Red hot, blue cold, white neutral. So that's how you can look at it, or average. In this case, my first tier, we're going to have Ja'Marr Chase, Malik Nabers, CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, and Nico Collins in this tier. Some tougher matchups actually in this tier, maybe matchups that don't quite align the best with these guys' assets. Or expect what they do best in terms of what the defense takes away the best from teams. So maybe there will be a little bit of disappointment in the total fantasy. Maybe we don't get some 30-point outputs here. But obviously, you're starting these guys, just, I'm sure, not too unlike this next tier. I think you're starting these guys. My wide receiver 6 this week is Chris Godwin. Going up against Atlanta, I do think that matchup works just a little bit more in favor of him than Mike Evans, my wide receiver 10 at the bottom of this tier. Followed up with DK Metcalf going against the New York Giants. Marvin Harrison Jr. going against San Francisco. Been surprisingly hit or miss in terms of their ability to guard wide receivers, so that should be a good matchup. As long as Arizona can take advantage of it. And then Jaden Reed hanging in here, going up against the Los Angeles Rams, so we like that. The heating gauge definitely does not like that. I think expecting Green Bay to be able to go to the ground relatively quickly in this matchup would be my suspicion of what is going on there. By the way, this heating gauge over here, that's what the player temperature, as I have it labeled up there, is just a gauge of factors that are going to lead to this player either having a great week or maybe a poor week, or a limited week, etc. So that's all that is. That's gonna bring us on to wide receivers 11 through 15, starting off with Garrett Wilson, followed by Deebo Samuel, Stephon Diggs, Brandon Ayuk, and Chris Olave. And this is my first love of the week in Garrett Wilson, and I know that you do not want to trust Garrett Wilson, but Minnesota has allowed the fourth most fantasy points to the wide receiver position in half PPR scoring. It's not a shock to think that they could continue what pattern I think I've noticed is kind of just jumping on these teams early for the most part, and then forcing them to pass to catch up, and then the wide receivers have been racking up some points against that secondary. And speaking of that secondary, and why you shouldn't be afraid of it for Garrett Wilson this week, is that Minnesota does not have Patrick Surtain, who hopefully most of y'all ignored my rankings last week, but maybe listened to that quiver in my voice every time that I said I would play him, but you don't have to. There was a lot of wink, wink, maybe just don't play him, but I also did suggest him a fair bit, so, I hope that didn't kill too many people out there with Garrett Wilson's ranking last week. And other than that, Deebo Samuel, obviously in a fantastic matchup against Arizona, actually is projecting incredibly nicely, has the highest ceiling out of all of my projections. Stephon Diggs here going up against Buffalo. I think I might have to lower Stephon Diggs in my rankings, actually. Quite possibly at least to the back of this tier. Buffalo, I believe, has allowed the fewest points, fantasy points, to the wide receiver position. And so I'm going to have to look a little bit closer on that, but expect this to change. I'm just going to go ahead and do it now. Brandon Ayuk, obviously projections aren't that great based on what he's done this season. I'm not too concerned about it at this point yet. It sucks, but I'm overall not concerned about it. Chris Olave, don't like this matchup a whole lot against Kansas City, so slightly worried about that. Aside from, the heating gauge likes it, thinks that New Orleans is going to have to pass a lot, but Kansas City really good against wide receivers, and that could be another kind of lower. It could be similar to this last weekend's game, a 17-10 kind of game. Wouldn't be shocking. And then, Drake London there to finish this tier up against Tampa Bay. Not too bad, and I think that this actually matchup works a little bit in favor of Drake London compared to his teammate in Darnell Mooney, which we'll get to. That's going to bring us on to this next tier of wide receivers, going from my wide receiver 17 all the way on down to wide receiver 26, starting with Khalil Shakir, followed by Brian Thomas Jr., DJ Moore, Deontay Johnson, Zay Flowers. Really good matchup against Cincinnati there. George Pickens, Terry McLaurin, Rashid Shaheed, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Amari Cooper to finish this tier off. And I know a lot of people have Amari Cooper ranked quite a bit higher, going against Washington. That's great. As you can see, though, I mean, he's very boomer bust. There's some more sure things that I'm willing to take a chance on. That connection I don't think it's been very good so far this year from everything I can gather. But let's see, anything else interesting? Brian Thomas Jr. against Indianapolis. We saw him starting to get more targets, and hopefully that continues. But I do like that matchup quite a bit for him. Khalil Shakir, high-scoring game between them and Houston. I expect him to have a solid week there. DJ Moore, there's some concern, but another really good matchup. He hasn't really quite taken advantage of these previous matchups, though, so that's how these guys get a little bit ahead of him. Deontay Johnson, really tough matchup in Chicago, obviously projects really nicely, and it's going to be tough to sit him, but I'm concerned about that a little ways. Zay Flower, really good matchup. Hasn't been very good this year so far. And that's going to bring us on to my love of the week here in George Pickens going up against Dallas. And what I like about this matchup is that George, we know he's good at the deep ball, and Dallas is allowing the 6th highest average yards per completion. So I think that that's, one of those nice matches that could work in favor of George Pickens and, of course, his quarterback connecting. And when we talk about that, Dallas is without Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence, which should help to give Fields, his quarterback, more time to find him, to draw up those deeper plays, and just time to be comfortable and hopefully hit George Pickens accurately. That's, what needs to happen, but a little less pressure on him could go a long ways. That's going to bring us on to the next tier. We're looking from wide receiver 27 all the way on down to wide receiver 38. Sneak peek there at 39. This tier begins with Wan'Dale Robinson going up against Seattle, and we'll just cover that right now. He is my third love of the week here. And I would say there is a similar story actually working here for Jackson Smith-Njigba. And just in terms of what I like about Wan'Dale Robinson can be almost said identically for JSN in terms of the matchup. And that is that Seattle allows the 5th fewest yards per reception in terms of JSN's matchup. New York Giants allow the 9th fewest yards per reception. So obviously these guys playing against each other. I didn't even notice that until I started saying that. So yeah, each of these matchups they're in the bottom 10 there, or top 10 for fewest yards per reception, which means that these lower ADOT, slot type of receivers in Wan'Dale Robinson and Jackson Smith-Njigba could get peppered with some decent targets. These are what these defenses will allow instead of allowing the big play where they focus against that. And Wan'Dale, in this instance, is definitely that guy, averaging has an ADOT of 4.3 yards. That's 86th amongst all receivers. And with that, I'm looking for another high target game for Wan'Dale Robinson to once again feast from, especially in full PPR matchups. And then after that, my wide receiver 28 is Jerry Jeudy, followed by Tyreek Hill, Michael Pittman Jr., T. Higgins, Christian Kirk, Darnell Mooney, Xavier Worthy, Dontavian Wicks, Courtland Sutton, Keenan Allen, and Romeo Doubs to finish this tier up. You can see Keenan Allen, Romeo Doubs, the projections aren't working the best, but given the matchups and given what we know about these players and what's happened so far this season, we're giving them a little bit of a grace compared to how those projections look. But I am fading Darnell Mooney specifically in here, my wide receiver 33, going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I believe this is our first fade. Tampa Bay allows the 7th fewest yards per completion, and Darnell Mooney tends to be the deeper route option compared to Drake London. So kind of an opposite argument to Wan'Dale Robinson, to JSN, although it's not quite the same situation here. He's not like an extremely... He was in Chicago, but they're using him differently. His ADOT is not extremely high, but it is higher than Drake London's. He does tend to run deeper routes than Drake London does, and thus I think he is the weapon that this defense is going to want to just make sure that he doesn't kill them based on how they limit wide receivers. On top of that, it's not really a great matchup for wide receivers overall. Tampa Bay allows the 7th fewest fantasy points to wide receivers, so not overly excited for him or Drake London to have a huge game here against Tampa Bay. And with that, Xavier Worthy, they could draw up some sort of game plan for him, get him more, but we still saw him with, I think it was just 4 targets. Maybe he had a couple touches on top of that last week. So we'll see his target share and everything go up, but is it going to be more than 7? I don't know yet. And New Orleans is a really good defense. I'm just not expecting this to be a incredibly high output game in terms of fantasy points and all that good jazz. So that's going to bring us on to this tier from wide receiver 39 all the way down to wide receiver 48 to finish this video off. At wide receiver 39, we have Jordan Addison going up against New York Jets. I think that explains a lot of what I'm worried about him for this week, but there's a little bit of specifics for that. Followed by wide receiver 40, Juwan Jennings, Allen Lazard, Josh Downs, Jalen Waddle, Rome Odunze, Jacoby Myers, Tyler Lockett, that's Tyler Lockett, followed by Xavier Legette and Tank Dell in at wide receiver 48. And I'm currently not ranking Devontae Adams and somebody else that's less important. I'll double check before the end of the video. But for Jordan Addison, my second fade of the week, he tends to be the deep ball target, and the Jets allow the third lowest yards per completion. So another one of those defenses that, like a lot of defenses are doing this year, they're not allowing the deep stuff. That's where Jordan Addison thrives the most. And so I'm just thinking it's a Justin Jefferson game for the wide receiver room there in a tough matchup overall against the New York Jets. And then Jacoby Myers going up against Denver, and I wrote 2 notes here, Patrick and Surtain. So yeah, Surtain's obviously been very shut down. Now the silver lining is that Patrick Surtain may not be shadowing Jakobi Meyers. They might not find that necessary. They might just keep a little bit of a simpler defense out there this week. Give Surtain a week off to not shadow somebody around as much. I don't know. Does that take more energy or not? I would imagine so by a little ways. So that's why I'm not lower on Jakobi Meyers. I do think that there might be a chance that he'll be open when they line him up in certain areas of the field and Patrick Surtain doesn't follow him. Because I could see you thinking, well, anytime that, Trey Tucker, having Surtain on Trey Tucker doesn't hurt, because that's the big shot that can really kill you in a moment's notice. So that's why I don't know that he follows Jakobi Meyers around. That's my logic. Tyler Lockett going against New York Giants. It's a solid matchup there. Xavier Legette, a really interesting matchup here going up against Chicago. Going to be a really, really physical corner that's going to be covering him most of the time. He's a very physical wide receiver, so that could get chippy. That could be a really fun watch if you like to watch those types of matchups. Think like the old, I think it was it Chauncey Gardner-Johnson versus Mike Evans? Was that what that one was? Or who was it that Mike Evans, they always hated each other for New Orleans. And then Tank Dell is not a good matchup. Buffalo really doesn't allow a lot of yards per reception. They don't allow the deep ball. They don't allow much to wide receivers. So unfortunately, not a great day. But, you could see Houston, if this is a tight matchup or whatever, I would imagine there might be a player or two dialed up for Tank Dell. Some surprise plays. We haven't seen them all year, so I could see that. Jalen McMillan's the other guy, and as you can see, I have about 77 receivers in total ranked this week. All right, with that, as a reminder, rankings do change throughout the week, so check them out up on the website. As when they get changed up on the website, or come visit me live where they'll be up on the screen. And that is it. Thank you very, very much. Look forward to the running back video tomorrow, and then quarterbacks and tight ends Thursday morning. Peace out.